Welcome to the Twins and Multiples webinar. Types of twin. In the womb, a fetus grows within its mother's uterus. The placenta attaches to the wall of the uterus and provides everything that the baby needs to grow. The placenta is connected via an umbilical cord to the baby, and the fetus is enclosed in a fluid-filled sac surrounded by a thin membrane called the amnion. A second membrane, called the chorion, surrounds the amniotic sac. When two babies grow at the same time, we call this twins, and triplets, quads, and so forth are called higher order multiples. They can grow in lots of different ways. To understand this, you need some definitions. The zygote is the egg. The chorion is the outer membrane. The amnion is the inner membrane, which forms a sac filled with amniotic fluid containing the fetus. Mono is one and di is two. Twins can occur in different ways. You have probably heard of fraternal or identical twins. But what is inside the womb is important to understand, as it can lead to different risks in pregnancy. Fraternal or dizygotic twins come from two different eggs with two different sperm. They are no more alike than any other brothers or sisters, but they are in the uterus at the same time. Most twins are dizygotic. Identical or monozygotic twins come from the same egg and sperm, which divides into two embryos early in the pregnancy. The later the divide, the more is shared, so early division will result in separate placentas and sacs, with later divides leaving shared placentas or a shared placenta and shared inner sac. Even later divides result in conjoined twins. So, in order of how common the presentations are, dichorionic diamniotic twins have separate inner and outer sacs. They each have a placenta, although this could have fused together. They are known as di-di twins or DCDA and can be fraternal or identical. Modi or MCDA twins share one outer sac and one placenta, but have separate inner sacs. These twins may be at risk of twin-to-twin transfusion, so will be closely monitored in pregnancy. They will always be identical. Momo or MCMA twins share everything, and as a result there is a risk of their cords becoming entangled, so this is treated as a significantly higher risk pregnancy, and parents will be recommended to have a caesarean section. Think of it this way. Di-di twins are like two houses in the same street. Each baby lives in their own house and manages their own resources. Modi twins are like having two flats in the same building. Each baby lives in the same building, but they have their own private space. They are separated by interior walls and doors, but the exterior of the building is shared. Momo twins are like two individuals living in the same room in the same house or flat. They share the resources that come with the space, and they share within the same walls. Triplets and other higher order multiples can be any combination of the twin types. For example, 3 dizygotic babies, or 1 dizygotic and 2 monozygotic. Things not to say to parents of twins. Remember not to ask if twins are identical if you've been told they are a boy and a girl. In fact, there are many things that twin parents get sick of hearing. All of these are best avoided. Saying things like, "I don't know how you do it," disempowers the parent and sets twins up as a negative experience. It's also important to treat twins as individuals and to refer to them where possible by name instead of as the twins. Encourage parents to develop a relationship with each baby. Twin tips. Baby wearing. Using slings is great for all adults looking after twins. Multiples often come early, so be prepared by adjusting your contract to allow for this. They will often stay in hospital until around 40 weeks, having a little extra support. Ensure the family have tiny baby clothes ready. If the twins are identical, a spot of nail varnish can help early identification, or keeping them on the same side, for example, baby one always on the left. Set up changing stations downstairs as well as upstairs, and have safe sleep surfaces, such as Moses baskets downstairs to use. Parents may need additional support to adjust from a hospital stay or caesarean section. I interviewed Kathryn Stagg, an IBCLC specialising in supporting multiple families, and she is a mum of twins herself.
I'm really pleased to talk to you, Kathryn, today. Would you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, so I'm Kathryn. I'm an international board certified lactation consultant, which basically means that I've done an awful lot of breastfeeding support over the years, and also have had to sort of do 90 hours lactation training, etc. I'm also a mum of twins as well, and I've been supporting breastfeeding twins in sort of my local community for around 14 years. I started off as a peer supporter and then trained as a breastfeeding counsellor before doing my IBCLC exam. And because I was a mum of twins, I got given all the twin families. So I've had lots of experience to that. And then about 5 years ago, I set up Breastfeeding Twins Triplets UK Facebook group to support multiple birth families to breastfeed their babies. And we've now got 6,000 members, so it's really taken off massively.
Fantastic. So that's a huge resource for you to draw on in terms of knowing what families worry about.
Yeah.
What would you say are the toughest things for families to manage in those early days of parenting twins or multiples?
I think it's really just how intense it is, actually, more than anything. It's always intense having one baby even, and if you've got 2 or 3, it does actually double or triple the intensity of the situation. They often have different needs as well, so they're not going to be textbook, each baby exactly the same, even identical twins. They quite often have very different personalities and different mannerisms and everything, so sort of being able to stretch yourself in lots of different directions, and sort of just getting to know your babies, and you have to sort of go with the flow as much as you can. You have to kind of let quite a lot of standard slip of other things and that sort of thing in order to cope with it. It's quite a big transition, and I think especially if it's their first babies as well, it can be quite a shock kind of how sort of difficult it is, I think, to start with. And I think there are some things which are just, they tend to be, twins tend to be born a little bit earlier than average. I think the majority are born between sort of 37 weeks pregnant. 37 weeks is deemed full term for twin pregnancy. But what they don't tell parents quite often is that a 37-week baby actually isn't isn't a full-term baby. It doesn't behave like a full-term baby, so they're often very sleepy and they're difficult to feed, and they have to wake them up. And sometimes you just trying to get a full feed into them is really difficult. So it's quite challenging, and they do develop quite quickly. And usually by the time you get to that sort of 40-week gestation dates, they're usually starting to behave more like normal newborns, but then that's really difficult as well because they don't like to be put down very much, and they go from these sleepy, slightly early babies to suddenly being alert most some of the day, and you're just like, what do I do with them? So it's it can be quite challenging, but thankfully things like feeding and such like quite often improve quite a bit around that time as well, so that really helps a bit. They sort of start to settle in, but yeah, it's just having just have to kind of have quite realistic expectations of how much you're going to get done. I think that's the most important thing, especially in our society where we expect to bounce back and be, perfect straight after birth, go back to the gym, all this sort of stuff. It's pretty, not doable with one baby, and it really isn't with more than one. You have to give yourself a lot of time.
Setting expectations with clients can be really important. I know I've gone to a twin family before, 4-day-olds, and mum's question was, so are you okay if I go out for lunch now with my partner? And these were twins that she'd like to breastfeed. So that was it was a challenging situation to manage those expectations.
Yes.
What things do you find, particularly on your large Facebook group, are the real worries for families as they are still pregnant with twins or multiples?
Well, I mean, it's a high risk pregnancy anyway. You know what I mean? You know, so even fraternal twins are 10. You know, they're not as high risk, but you know, all the way through pregnancy, everyone will be saying to you, you're going to have these babies early. They're going to be early. You're not going to be able to do this. You're not going to be able to do that. You're not going to be able to breastfeed. You're not going to be able to, you know, I don't know, go out ever again. You'll never sleep again. You get, you get all this. It's not a very. You actually don't get all the nice positive things that you get when you're pregnant with one baby. You get a lot of people going, "Oh my God, that's awful." You actually get that from some people. You know what I mean? That sort of reaction, which, you know, when you're feeling a little bit anxious yourself, doesn't really help matters very much. And also, it's quite a highly managed birth as well. You know, so they really like you to, you know, be induced by 37 weeks. Generally, or, you know, cesarean sometimes, depending on whether it's identical pregnancy or a fraternal pregnancy as well. There's different sort of, you know, nice guidelines for each, and they're, you know, they're always talking about, you know, risks of this and risks of that. You know, so it's kind of, I think when mums and parents sort of bring home two healthy babies, it's quite a lot of a relief from that point of view. Mm-hmm. But also then you've got to deal with actually having, you know, to deal with the babies. And a lot of people, I don't think, get past the birth thing, even more so than with a singleton pregnancy. You know, we all know that most new mums are thinking about, you know, birth, labour, and they forget about the next bit.
Not the parenting bit that you do.
Yeah. What do we do when the baby's actually here? Yeah. So, you know, I think actually it can be even more like that sometimes with a multiple birth, because they are so focused on getting these babies out safely and alive, you know, which, you know, is a good thing. And we obviously want, you know, nice, healthy babies. That's a really good thing. But you know, you quite often are so focused on that actually the part afterwards, sometimes, you know, you haven't really sort of given it much thought. Having said that, though, we have noticed on the Facebook group that we do get a lot of people joining whilst they're pregnant. Mm-hmm. Whether we get more than you do with standard breastfeeding groups, I'm not entirely sure, but I do think that people join because so many people are telling them that they can't breastfeed their twins. Mm. So they join the Facebook group, which is called Breastfeeding Twins and Trips, to find out whether they can or not.
But so to answer that question from those 6,000 mums, can you twin breastfeed?
You can, yes. You really, really can. I've done it. Yes, you really can.
And are you unusual?
I think probably so, but it's getting a little bit better from that point of view, and I think the Facebook group has helped massively. Actually, I'd really love to know whether the twin breastfeeding rates in the UK has gone up in the last 5 years or not. I don't know how to find that out. I don't think there is any surveys at the moment that will tell us.
What sort of support do you find that twin mums benefit from to enable their breastfeeding relationship if it was their choice to breastfeed?
So firstly, the most important thing is to know that you can do it. So because a lot of people will tell you can't. And so that's one of the actually most valuable things I think about the Facebook group, is that there are thousands of other people that have done it in the group. And so it's quite obvious that you can, you know. So that's the first thing. So enabling them to actually give it a go, first of all. And then I think it's getting to know the sort of challenges that may occur. You know, there are a few more hurdles to get over than your average breastfeeding journey, let's say. Things like, you know, as I said, the slightly early birth, babies tend to be a lot sleepier. They sometimes can't feed as well to start with as they would do if they were a full-term baby. They have sort of slightly uncoordinated sucking patterns sometimes. They don't sort of take a huge amount of milk. They're not particularly efficient to start with. And so if families are given the kind of heads up that this kind of might happen, they can find their local breastfeeding support in advance, for example, which can you know, be massively help. They also know what to do and what to look for as to whether it's working, I think, which is one of the main things. You know, so knowing about napping output, knowing about sort of watching for the signs of a kind of good milk transfer. So that's, you know, the milk going from the breast to the baby. So, you know, nice deep sucks and swallows, and, you know, having a good proportion of the feed being that, and not just kind of like fluttery sucking where they don't really get much milk. Learning about breast compressions, I think that's one of the biggest tools actually for getting breastfeeding going well in a twin and triplet family. Anyone where the babies are born a little bit premature, breast compressions are your biggest friend. That and the deep latch, if you can get the two going, that really, really helps a lot. And then, of course, there's the milk production. So everyone will tell you that, again, that you can't make enough milk for 2 babies or 3 babies. It's complete rubbish. I think that, I don't know what stats there are out there. I don't think there's a research project on it. That's, something that needs to be looked at. But it seems to me like the majority of twin and triplet mums can make enough milk for their babies, as long as the babies are feeding well, so feeding efficiently and feeding frequently. And so it's just making sure that parents know that they have to feed their babies, frequently, and then getting a good latch, and ensuring that they actually start. A lot of parents have to do a little bit of topping up to start with.
Mm-hmm. And by topping up, you mean additional formula milk from a bottle? Yeah,
maybe formula or expressed, something, either that, and it can be from a bottle, or it can be cup feeding, or some finger feeding. Some people do occasionally. Paste bottle feeding is really important if you're doing that. If you're trying to sort of do bottle feeding and breastfeeding, it's important to really pace the feeds, slow the feeds down, so that the baby doesn't get used to a really easy, fast flow of milk. So that's another good thing for people to know about if they're expecting twins. But I think also the other thing to know is that actually this kind of topping up in the early days, which you may have to do if the babies are a bit too sleepy to feed well, it's a temporary thing. And this is what a lot of people don't understand. They think it's going to be that intense, because topping up and pumping and feeding in all sorts of different ways is really, really time consuming. There's not much time for anything else. And so, if a lot of times, if you're thinking that you're having to do this for the rest of your feeding journey, it can be just like, okay, I'm not going to do it, I'm going to give up. So really, actually, it's quite often only up to around this kind of 40-week due date-ish time where they, and then they start to wake up a bit more, they start to feed a little bit more efficiently, and you can gradually phase out the top-ups and start to move towards exclusive breastfeeding if that's what you want to do.
Thank you. So many multiples will have a stay in hospital. How does this affect the transition home for the families?
Yeah, it's around 40% of twins go to the neonatal unit, so it's quite a large amount. And I think nearly all triplets, there are a few exceptions. Occasionally you get them staying with mum, but not very often. So yeah, starting in the neonatal unit is quite, I think it's quite shocking actually for a lot of families. I don't think they're prepared for it. I mean, if they've had notice that it's going to happen, you can go and be shown around and things like that. That kind of helps a little bit, but I think it's quite a difficult environment, really. I think it's because it feels like they're not your babies quite often. Because the nurses are looking after them. The nurses are kind of doing all the changing and the feeding and to start with, and so you can sort of feel like, well, why am I here? Sort of thing. So it's really important to make sure that you let your nurses know that you want to help out, you want to get involved. And the more you do that whilst they're in hospital, obviously then the easier it'll be when they come out and you're suddenly left on your own with the babies. It's like, it can be quite worrying time, because you're used to, when you're in the hospital, you're used to having those nurses there for you whenever you want them. If you've got any questions, if you're not sure about something, you've got someone to ask, and so obviously they won't discharge you with the babies until they're sure that the babies are well enough for that to happen and they're feeding well and everything seems to be working well. But from family's point of view, it can be, are you sure we're ready to go home with these babies? I'm not sure we know what we're doing. It can be quite worrying, so and also the hospital do quite often work to a really strict routine as well, so with feeds and nappy changes and waking and sort of, and quite often families have this expectation that they'll be able to keep it up when they get home. Babies quite often start to wake up a bit more, as I was saying, around the same time that they're discharged. And so often routine and stuff goes completely out of the window, and that can be quite stressful if that's what you're expecting to happen when you come out. So yeah, it's quite a big change, I think, when you've had all that support and then suddenly you're left in the community, and they do visit you and they make sure you're okay, and you do have a somebody you can call if you want to ask something. But it's it's quite stressful, I think, when you first get left with your babies. But again, it's really nice at the same time, because a lot of people, I want to go take my babies home now, and it is nice to actually be able to just go home and relax and concentrate on them yourself as well.
So what would be your top tips for maternity nurses who are coming in and supporting twin or multiple families?
So I think actually in regards to any family, especially those ones that have been in hospital for a while, but also any family, it's actually really often about kind of empowering the parents that they can actually do this. So they you can help them, you can show them how to do things, but making sure that they do them, and they get confident doing it themselves. A maternity nurse is not going to be there forever, so they, at some point are going to have to do it there, and they won't probably be there 24 hours a day either. And so there'll be parts of the day or night where they'll be having to do these things themselves. So just building confidence, getting parents to understand about, sort of normal newborn behaviour, and that does occur with twins and triplets as well. It's really, they are just babies at the end of the day. We have to remember this. There may be more than one of them, but all the same behaviours happen happen. Sometimes it's a week or two later if they were born a bit early, but you still go through the same sort of patterns that you would with any other baby. And I think, sort of helping with feeds and sort of, if parents are in this triple feeding madness that they sometimes are discharged with, maternity nurse doing the top-ups could just massively take the pressure off, for example. That's a really good role for them. Doing all the other stuff that you would normally do, like changing and settling and winding, and it's just so nice to have another pair of hands. I really think actually for a set of twins you quite often need 3 adults to deal with them quite nicely, because you've got especially if you're breastfeeding, so you've got the breastfeeding needs to be done, and the topping up and the settling, and quite often you need one baby each. Bottle feeding is easier, one at a time than it is doing it together, especially if you're trying to pace the feeds, etc. So having a spare set of hands is really, really, really useful in this situation. And things like twin babies quite often settle better if they're sort of slept together. There's quite a lot of research. There's a great project which the Twins Trust and the Basis Online Durham University project did, where they kind of talked a bit about how to sleep twins, basically how to put them, and they found that actually if twins are slept together next to each other in a cot, that it kind of, they start to get a bit more in sync, and they have their sleep cycles at a similar time, and they can kind of wake at a similar time. And if you're trying to really get more efficient, and feeding your babies at the same time is a really good way to do that. Whether you're breast or bottle feeding, it can be quite a good way to kind of maximize gaps in between if you're trying to sleep and things like that. So they do get a bit more in sync. And actually getting your babies to sleep at the same time is a bit of a, doesn't happen very much when you've got new babies. Anytime the babies are asleep, make sure that the parents are sleeping as well. That's another really good point. So every single time, doesn't matter what time of day or night it is, go and have a nap. Because again, sleep is quite tricky to start with. And we all know that babies are quite nocturnal when they're first born as well, so they tend to feed more at night than they do in the daytime. So making sure the parents know that it's okay to have a nap and go to bed if you want to in the daytime. It's definitely a good idea. Trying to think what else would be good. I think if the mum's breastfeeding as well, having one of the bedside cot kind of arrangement works really, really well, because they can literally just sort of roll over and pick the baby up, or both babies, and feed them quite easily, put them back down again. Babies quite often settle a little bit better as well, when they're in contact with the parents or very near the parents. So I think that's a good scenario. There is some larger bedside cots that work quite well, and some people just sort of have a standard cot and have it pushed right up to the bed, and that can work quite well as well. You can take the side off some of them and it works. So
do you have any top equipment recommendations for twin families? Not particularly brands, but items or things that can really help with that journey?
I think having a couple of good bouncers is a really good idea. Somewhere to sit safe that you can put the baby down, maybe slightly get upright. So if they, just if babies are born a bit early, sometimes they have a little bit more kind of refluxy type behaviour. So being able to keep them upright a little bit works really well. There are some great twin slings out there, so they can be really, really good. Having a couple of single ones is good if you've got 2 parents or a parent and a maternity nurse or whatever. That's good, but actually there are some really good twin slings that you can have as well, where you can put both babies in. Actually a stretchy wrap, you can do that quite well in the early days too. You can carry both babies in that. There are twin breastfeeding cushions, which actually are quite useful. There are a variety. and it all depends on sort of how tall you are from your. We always say on the twins Facebook group, you have to measure your lap to nipple distance in order to know which one to buy. So some of them are higher than others.
And obviously breastfeeding support, we suggest parents don't buy breastfeeding pillows per se, and put the babies on and ramp up behind them. How is that different though with twins?
I think because if you're tandem feeding, you tend to do double rugby hold, so one baby under each arm. And with rugby hold, you do need some sort of support. So it's sort of, we do tend to use cushions more than the average person, I'd say. I think getting the height right is really, really important. So some of them are really too tall. I'm quite short, and so I couldn't use, a couple of them that are on the market because, we just wouldn't hold the babies in the right place. So sort of getting the setup really correct so that it's supporting the babies in the right position is really important. And, you can sort of add cushions here and there and things like that. But if you can get your babies feeding really well on a cushion, you can actually feed them hands free, which is a bit like, it's a bit of a revelation. So we quite often have baby here, and then your dinner plate in the middle.
That is certainly parenting.
It's a very common occurrence. I've got some fantastic photos of all sorts of food stuff being dropped on babies' heads, like ice cream and sort of curry and stuff like that. So it's very normal because obviously you don't have much time to eat when you have two babies. So if you can get feeding hands free, it makes a massive difference to being able to cope with things. You can look at your phone, turn the telly on. There's all sorts of stuff. So actually having a good feeding cushion does work well. You don't have to buy one of the twin specific ones. You can set yourself up with some good pillows and such like, and it's just getting everything at the right height. But the twin ones do work really well actually.
Good positions for feeding babies who are taking milk from a bottle.
So there's if you're trying to, obviously generally it's better to try and sort of hold babies and feed them if in general, you know what I mean. So I'd always suggest that parents try and do that as much as they can. They have 2 babies, 3 babies though, they can't do it all the time. It's just one of those things. So there are a few, again, you can use bouncy chairs, so you have the babies in the bouncy chairs facing you, and you can, hold the bottles, and again, you can, because they're sitting fairly upright, you can pace the feeds fairly well in that position. There are some, couple of, there's one breastfeeding cushion actually, which is kind of like an M shape, and actually you can put 2 babies sitting inside that, and it holds them up, and that actually works quite well. So that's quite nice. They're very good for when they start sitting up as well. So they're not just for feeding. You can use them for all sorts of things. So that's quite a good one. But I think, actually having, if you're bottle feeding, I think actually having a spare pair of hands sometimes and trying to cuddle baby, hold baby, feed responsibly and pace the feed is kind of the best way to do it if you can. Generally, it's harder to tandem feed with bottles actually than it is if you're breastfeeding. It's a little bit trickier to do it well. So.
And are there any safety considerations that maternity nurses might see with twin families, for example, bottle propping or bed sharing? Anything to say on the sort of safety aspects?
I think bottle propping is really something that we, shouldn't be done really. And obviously it's really tempting if you've got more than one baby, especially if they're, feeding. So trying to set up a way of being able to feed them safely and, I think is really important. And just saying to parents that it's actually a really important bonding time as well. It's not just breastfeeding that you're bonding with your babies. You bond with your babies when you bottle feed them as well. And so it's a really important part of their day, to have some time with their babies, spend a bit of time with their babies. So, bottle propping is quite dangerous, and you would certainly never leave them alone feeding. Absolutely not. So that's a complete no-no. And, I don't think bottle feeding should really be advised generally.
You mean
bottle propping? Sorry. Bottle propping should not be advised really. With bed sharing, generally, if babies are sort of full term, there's no more risk than there is with a single baby. For babies that are born a little bit early, again, there's no research that they say you shouldn't bed share with a premature baby, which is there's more risks of SIDS, etc. What they don't say is when it's safe to do so. So they haven't done any research on this at all. So from a common sense point of view, we suggest that once babies are past due date, and as long as they're well, there's no respiratory issues, they're feeding well, they're waking themselves, they're behaving like a normal newborn baby, then the risk of bed sharing shouldn't be any more than it would be if it was a full-term baby. So I think that's probably, and that does tie in with them beginning to wake up and be a bit more, um, I say unsettled. Let's say is that the right word? I don't know. As
More,
they come,
more or less.
more or less. That's a more positive way of putting it.
More or less.
Yeah, more alert around this kind of due date time as well. And so it quite often, you don't actually really need to bed share with a premature baby because they do tend to sleep all the time. You know what I mean? So it's less likely that you'll need to do it anyway. So, it sort of ties in with that time as well. So I think, that's what I always suggest to people. But at the end of the day, they need to read the research, do their own, research on it, and make sure that they're comfortable doing it themselves as well.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much indeed for your time today, Kathryn. It's been extremely informative. Would you just have any last places that you would point us to for other resources for maternity nurses going into work with the twin family, either for themselves for further reading or to support families?
Yep. So there is loads of fantastic information on the Twins Trust website. They have lots of leaflets, etc. as well. It's a really good idea to signpost parents to it as well. So that they've got resources that they can get to. They've also got webinars, etc. that they do and things. So it can be quite a good place for parents to go. We have ourselves, the Facebook group is Breastfeeding Twins and Triplets UK is now a UK charity, and we have a website, and so we've got lots of articles on breastfeeding and behaviour and all the sort of typical stuff you come across if you're a twin family. And we will be hopefully starting some courses and things like that at some point when I've written them. The Multiple Birth Foundation as well has lots of great information, especially on pregnancy, etc. And AIMS has really great. There's a multiple birth part to the AIMS website, which talks a lot about different birthing options, which I know maternity nurses are not. They don't deal with families antenatally particularly, but it's really useful to know about all the different options that might occur, so that when you come across them postnatally, you would have understood why it would have happened, etc. I think it's really good to read up on all these sort of things. And that's basically I'm trying to think. There's not that many books out there at the moment. It would be nice if I need to write one, basically.
I was going to ask you that, please, because I often get asked for book recommendations, and I cannot hand in heart say that there is one twin book that I would actually want a parent to read.
Yeah, there needs to be
all of them that are around. So we'll look forward to reading your book. You've had time to write it. So.
And there's about 32 hours in the day. Yes, I'm
Thank you very much indeed for your time today.
Lovely, thanks.
For more resources, look at the websites for the Twins Trust, Multiple Births, and Breastfeeding Twins and Triplets.